UFC 280. Guys, what's your prediction? Get them in early. Get them in early because it's coming. And of course, what I'm talking about is the curse. Who's going to pull out? Who's going to have the injury? Who can't make the flight? What's it going to be? We have had cards like this in the past. This thing is so stellar. This thing is so shockingly stellar that even if you go and look at the undercard, remember that Russian guy that jumped in the ring and punched Conor? That guy's on the card. Just by example, that guy's an undercard guy. Somebody you would know. You look at the main event, this is the fight I never knew that I wanted. I am literally counting down the days. I found that 280 is 3.5 weeks away. Oh, I was depressed this morning. I thought it was sooner than that. I feel like we have waited for this card for the entire year. Truly. I feel like these fights have been, it just feels that way. I've seen more headlines, more talk about this, more questions at press conferences. There's shows before that. It never works that way. If you got a pay-per-view here, people aren't asking questions about this pay-per-view. They stick it right here until that window comes. They've been talking about this card forever. And it's also, when I tell you it's the card I never knew I wanted, 2022 is a year unlike any year in UFC history. I just want you to observe that. It's very fascinating if you look at the UFC and their business practice. It's very interesting. It doesn't work a year ago. None of it. None of it works. Let's look at your main event. Islam versus Oliveira. I personally did not want that fight until Oliveira was done with Gaethje. Just by example, Islam's going to take him down. He's going to keep him there. It's going to be 5 rounds of boringness. But you guys were on board with that, right? Islam's been trying to get this fight. His record isn't more beautiful now. He's like 15-1, 16-1, and the one was the first one. Years of beating people, and you just weren't after that fight. When it came out, it was a 3.5-1 spread. I don't know that there's been a huge fight in memory. A huge fight in memory that had a 3.5-1 spread. That would be the opposite of a huge fight. That would sound as though you've already got it figured out. If you already got it figured out, we have no business here. This business runs on anticipation. No other one word moves MMA forward more than anticipation. I can't wait for that fight. But 1 year ago, right, you get my point. If you were to look at Sterling versus Dillashaw, 1 year ago, we wouldn't have even discussed it. TJ was sitting on a suspension. If you were to look at Sugar Sean versus Peter Yan 1 year ago, this match never would have come about. Yan was ranked number 2 in the world. By example, if you want to go back 12 months ago, Sugar Sean wasn't ranked at all. Now, all of a sudden, it appears that it's a number 1 contenders bout, at least for Sean. That's a big bout. That's a massive match. And depending on how the championship match goes, it could even be a number 1 contenders match for Yan. That's just not a conversation that you would have been having. Then you've got Darush versus Gamrot. Now, that's going to be your fight of the night. That's going to be the most interesting and exciting 15 minutes that you get to witness. And then you finally get Sean Brady get an opportunity, and he's going to take on Belal Muhammad. Belal Muhammad will be opening the card. Think of it, when I tell you what a big card this is, Belal Muhammad, who has been nothing but main events, only plays in main events, only walks out for the last night. He's going to be opening the card. That's how loaded this is. Now, have we ever got something like this in history, something that we're actually counting down the days to, something that was this big, something that had that many great matches, where somebody didn't come in and screw it up? And I'm just wondering who that's going to be. And before anybody thinks they're going to be dancing on the grave of UFC 280, we've got the replacements right on the card. Betting has already said if something happens to Islam or Oliveira, that he's stepping in. How accurate is that? I tend to believe it, considering Volkanovski was turned away. Imagine UFC 280, imagine what I just laid out for you, and you have Volkanovski waiting in the wings. What happened? Why are we getting such a good card? Why are all these great fights here? Do we not know? Was this card starting to get thrown together? Maybe people didn't know who Sean Brady was. Maybe Belal and Sean Brady hadn't started their public back and forth yet. But this is an oddly stacked card. So, of course, we're going to look at the main event first, right? And I think that it's very good news that Benny goes in against either. If Benny was only going to fill in if Oliveira wasn't there, well, then we don't have anybody for Islam. It's just one of these examples. The fact that Benny knows it's going to, he understands what the backup fighter is. And then what happens with Gamrot, I don't know. But we got to start preserving the ones at the top. Look at Aljo and you look at Dillashaw. But if something happens there, we already have Sugar Sean and we have Peter Yan to choose from. I mean, just by example. This card won't hold up. The way that I just laid it out for you won't hold up, at least not historically speaking. The odds of it holding up are very, very slim. There's guys on this card right now that don't want to be there, just so you understand. And they might be talking the talk in the media. They're looking for their way out right now. One of them is going to find it, historically speaking. One of them actually will decide to pull the fire alarm. Do you guys know that story? You know, bomb threat story? Both stories true. Both stories at smaller fights. And you had a guy in the car that wanted out so bad. One guy pulled the fire alarm, had the building evacuated, and the other guy called in a bomb threat to have the building evacuated. You don't think that you would see that in the UFC, but we saw something happen 2 weeks ago. You chalk that up and call that whatever you want. A very nice young lady who I've told you stories about, Aspen Ladd, my pen pal. I told you I was being catfished. It wasn't Aspen Ladd. Okay, fine. But she just got released for missing weight. It was so many times I've lost track. Could have been 4 times. I know for sure it's 3, but it could have been 4. Now, I want good things to happen to Aspen. I will tell you, she's very sweet. And so is the person pretending to be her on Twitter. But you don't miss weight. Well, you really do need to understand that, guys. There are times, there are exceptions. I hear you. But you don't miss weight unless you're trying to tell a story. Missing weight and then missing it again, it's a cry for help to some degree. To some degree. But it's still done on purpose. You want somebody to get in there and make a decision. For some reason, you didn't know how to say it. Now, I don't want to stay on Ladd. I think she's having a hard day. I'm using her as an example because it's most recent. When I tell you that people don't want to fight, they don't want to fight, but they don't really know the way out. It's very hard. You get pulled in, here's where I am, you got a trainer, you got a manager, you got your parents, whatever it is that puts you in that position. And we have stars on UFC 280 right now that don't want to be there. I don't know who they are. I'm not calling them out. I'm sharing with you. They exist. And if history is our trajectory to the future, somebody's going to pull out. And they'll have a great excuse, right? They won't call it a bomb threat or pull the fight. We have better ones now. We have, oh, God, my shoulder. I mean, we've got all sorts. I'm just wondering who it's going to be. Who do you guys think? Someone's pulling off that card. One of those great fights that I just lined up will not happen. If you had to predict who the first one to come up with the excuse and find a way out is, who do you think it's going to be?